Hello and welcome to the 600th video for this channel. So I thank everyone for their support, for all the viewers and subscribers out there. And today we have another Caro-Kann chess opening. And Bobby Fischer is playing with the white pieces against a much lower rated opponent, Arthur Feuerstein. 2139 versus 2760 by Bobby Fischer, and this was played in 1971 at the Manhattan Chess Club in New York. So let's see what Fischer does here. Now when I pull up the game review, and I've mentioned this before, the names disappear, so just remember Fischer's with the white pieces. And let's see here. We'll see what accuracy rating they played, what rating level. So Bobby Fischer played at an 87.5% accuracy rating here versus 80.4 by his expert level opponent. And let's see, Bobby Fischer had one great move and 3 inaccuracies and 3 mistakes. His opponent had 2 inaccuracies but 5 mistakes and 1 miss. And if you can't see under my image, it looks like Bobby Fischer played at a 2500 level and his opponent played at 2350. So, about 200 points higher than his rating. And, Bobby Fischer played a little bit below his rating. Now, opening accuracy, 95.5% for Bobby Fischer versus 83.6% by his opponent, and then 81.4 in the middle game for Fischer versus 78.2 by his opponent, and then in the end game 87.6 for Fischer, but his opponent played 100% in the end game. It must have been a short end game. Okay, let's continue on. I'll pull up the analysis so we can watch as we look at the game. Fischer began with e4. And then we have c6, the Caro-Kann. So Fischer, instead of taking the center, he plays this Breyer variation, which I don't think I've gone over in any of my Caro-Kann videos. You can check out the opening exploration Caro-Kann videos if you haven't already. And Fischer just fortifies this central pawn. Maybe... this was a fun game. He was just trying to do something different to confuse his opponent, who may have had something planned, knowing that he was playing against Fischer. All right, a normal Caro-Kann continuation. You play c6 in order to push the d pawn. So what does Fischer do? He just develops the knight, which could recapture, or the pawn would probably recapture and fortify here. So... another interesting move by his opponent, g6 is played, preparing to fianchetto the bishop and fire down through the center and aim at the b2 pawn. So Fischer just ignores that, gets ready to fianchetto his own pawn. So this could be like a King's Indian attack setup. So perhaps that is what Fischer's playing. Maybe I'll have to do a video on that in the future, as I am not as familiar with that. Bobby Fischer used to play the King's Indian attack with white early in his career, and then the King's Indian defense. So it was almost like playing the King's Indian defense with reversed colors, where white was playing a King's Indian defense. All right, so... the bishop fianchettos on both sides, and then we continue with knight to f6. Apparently that is a mistake. The computer likes this move, knight to h6, or excuse me, we had knight to f6. The computer likes knight to h6. This kind of blocks the scope of the bishop, and it maybe invites a possible push of this pawn to chase the knight. So we have knight to f3, and the computer did recommend pushing the pawn and chasing that knight. So the game continues with castling by both sides. Then finally an exchange in the middle. The pawn recaptures, gaining space. And so black, instead of pushing his pawn forward, which would be unprotected, first he brings this other knight in to cover this square, perhaps getting ready to push this pawn. So, once again, the computer wants this pawn pushed to e5, but the rook is brought to the center, and the game continues with black finally moving this pawn up to equalize the space in the center, prevent this white pawn from harassing the knight. But anyway, the game continues with knight to c4, the best move in the position, adding more pressure to this pawn. The queen moves over here to protect. Apparently, it would have been better for this move to be played, adding both the knights, attacking this pawn the same way that Fischer is attacking black's pawn. So that's pretty interesting. Then what's recommended? Queen to e2 to just fortify there. Interesting. All right, well, back to the game. We had black playing queen to e7 here, helping guard the pawn. What does Fischer do here? Well, he just plays b3. An interesting move, perhaps preparing to bring the bishop up to add even more pressure to this pawn in the center. The computer actually likes queen up here to d6, targeting the unprotected queen, maybe queen exchange. But Fischer, who likes to attack and is known for trying to avoid draws, keeps the queens on the board. So the game continues with b5, the best move, chasing the knight, and then that is ignored for an attack on the queen. Apparently, the computer says that this move would have been better, bringing the knight to the edge where it is targeting this unprotected backwards pawn. So the game continues with this attack on the queen. The queen ignores that, but the pawn is pushed forward, attacking and blocking the bishop's attack on the queen. The computer says that it would be better to bring the c pawn forward. So we have bishop retreat and lining up on this long diagonal. So the game continues with bishop to a6, targeting the knight, threatening to capture and double pawns. What does Fischer do? Finally, he captures this pawn, recapture, and now the bishop captures. The computer says that it would be better to capture with the knight here. So, I guess we could take a quick look at that. If we capture there, let's see. Here the recommendation is to place place this rook, that rook on f8 over to c8 here. Maybe protect the unprotected pawn, prepare to push that pawn forward. So this is what the computer recommends. Protect that pawn, and then queen over to c1. Now it's saying just go ahead and take this anyway. Oh, because then you could have a discovered attack on the piece. So it could look something like this. Capture, then e5, and now you have a discovered attack on that rook. And the knight could jump in there and block, but then you could pick that knight off. All right, back to the game. We had a bishop capture. So now the game continues with rook to d8, attacking Fischer's queen. The queen moves to the best square, perhaps getting ready to create a bishop, queen and bishop battery. So pawn is pushed forward, and now we have Fischer thrusting a pawn forward also, preparing to possibly attack here. Let's see what happens. All right, Fischer's opponent repositions his bishop, lining up down through the center here, and aiming at white's king side. So Fischer ignores that, captures. We have a recapture, and then the queen creates this queen-bishop battery here. So let's see what happens next. The knight retreats here. Well, not retreats, I guess moves to the side. The computer says that's a mistake, that it would have been better to just bring this pawn forward, reinforce the b pawn, create a little extra room on the queen side. So here Fischer gladly exchanges the dark squared bishop, creating dark squared weaknesses now around black's king. So the knight recaptures, and then the game continues with a queen centralization, and the computer doesn't like that. Preferred is bishop to f1, maybe preparing to bring this bishop up here to c4, aiming at the king. So now that Fischer has brought his queen to e5, it allows a capture, which, if Fischer's at the time one of the best players in the world, if not the best, and then his opponent is just an expert level, which is a good player, but if you're playing against Fischer, his opponent was probably glad to trade off queens and minimize some of the attacking force that Fischer has. So we have a recapture. Rook grabs the 7th rank, but apparently this is a mistake, that knight to e6 would be better. And this swings the game. It would have been almost +1, but now it's +2.25 in white's favor. So we continue with rook protecting here. Knight repositions, jumping forward here, trying to get in the game. And then Fischer drops his knight back, but attacks the rook here. So this rook retreats, and then we have the knight hopping up to a5 and targeting the bishop. So the game continues with ignoring this bishop, bringing the rook over, lining up on this pawn. So Fischer continues with bishop to h3, apparently a mistake, and now the game's about even. Knight capturing the bishop would have been better. Then Fischer would have been left with one extra pawn, and with pawns on both sides, a bishop would be a little bit stronger than a knight. So instead, the game continues with bishop on h3, targeting the knight, perhaps trying to break up the pawns a little bit, and pinning the knight to this rook. So the game continues with f5. If you're behind in material, maybe try and exchange off some pawns. But it looks like bishop to a6 would have been a better move, because now the game has swung to +3 in Fischer's favor now. So what does Fischer do? Well, capture of the bishop, and now we have capturing of the pawns, and that's a good strategy. When you have a pawn majority, here it was 4 pawns to 3, you push the unopposed pawn, then try and trade that off, then push the next unopposed pawn, until you have one extra pawn that you can try and run up the board. You don't have to exchange all of them off, but usually you want to push that unopposed pawn whenever you have a pawn majority. It's the easier one to get moving. All right. Knight to d4, piling up on the c2 pawn. What does Fischer do next? And it says this is the best move, which is interesting. Well, I guess because, after this, now the knight is under attack, so you're kind of forced to move that knight. So we have rook and knight piling up on the c2 pawn. Fischer ignores that, captures on g6. We have a capture, and not a good move here. Knight to f3, forking the king and the rook would have been better here. So take a quick look at that. So apparently that would be the best move. Then you have the king, having to move here to protect. But what would that allow? Rook to f8 now. Apparently you do not want to capture here. That's interesting. Oh, because, this rook is under attack as well. Okay, man, yeah, Fischer, such a great player. So let's step this back a little bit and see what is going on here. So after this pawn push, so the game is close to even, but, this is probably the losing move right here, and there's still quite a few moves to go. Fischer captures, capture, and now the pawn captures, unleashing an attack on this knight. The knight moves out of the way, but now the pawn captures, unleashing the bishop on the rook. So, it looks like the best move is knight to f3, but white is probably still winning. So instead, the game just goes further downhill. Capture, capture, knight captures, and now we have a capture with check. The computer actually likes this check better, but the game is pretty much lost. And it looks like it would have been better to capture with the rook, because then at least I guess you would be targeting the bishop. All right, the game continued with rook to e8, the best move in the position. Now the king captures, but it allows a fork here. And the king had to capture there. Otherwise, we'd have a promotion of that pawn. So the game just continued on. And it's pretty much lost now. Knight is captured. And Fischer's opponent resigns here, being down, a piece and 2 pawns. The only thing black has is this pawn majority here, which is easily stopped with this extra bishop, and then 3 extra pawns, So that is what happens when one of the greatest players in the world plays a chess expert who is a 2100 player, which is 2100 expert chess player. That's a good chess player. So, it just shows how it's all relative. A good chess player to you would not be, very good of a player compared to Bobby Fischer. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this 600th chess video for this channel. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out the other videos on this channel. And, also leave comments if you'd like. And thank you for watching. Have a super chess day.